Hello, I'm Richard Ayres, a social care advisor at Care England. I want to thank you for joining us again. Now, if I asked care providers what the biggest workforce challenges are, most would say vacancies, agency reliance, or retention, but very few would say the actual recruitment process itself. Yet the evidence increasingly shows that how we recruit, not just how many people we recruit, is one of the biggest drivers of workforce stability, cost pressure, and ultimately the quality of care. We're seeing services spending a significant amount on internet job boards, struggling with no-shows, people not turning up to interview, and feeling constant pressure to fill roles. Yet at the same time, many of the underlying recruitment processes haven't fundamentally changed themselves. And that creates a system where candidates disengage early, providers waste money in their vital resources, and existing staff feel that pressure of ongoing vacancy coverage, which moves them ever closer towards burnout. So what's particularly interesting is that many of these challenges are not external. Many sit within the employer's process itself, be that speed, ownership, or understanding. So today isn't really about blaming the labour market itself. It's about really understanding what's happening between the application process and the actual hire itself, and what we can do differently to have a positive effect on the recruitment process. So I'm really pleased today to be joined by Stephen Forster, who is the founder of the Social Care Network, who works really closely with care providers on recruitment strategy and has developed a strong understanding of where within the system things tend to break down, whereas employers cause some of those issues that we're trying to overcome today. And importantly, he's going to help us outline what it looks like in practice. And that just leads me on to say a warm welcome to you, Stephen. Would you like to just introduce yourself to those on the call today, or on the session today?
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for having me, Richard. Yeah, really appreciate being here. I'm Stephen Forster, founder of the Care Social Network. I created the Care Social Network 7 years ago. Prior to that, I was a care assistant for a year in home care, and then I was a support worker in residential care and supported living. I then became a HR manager in care. And the Care Social Network came about because I was a carer, a support worker, HR manager. So I literally lived and breathed the full recruitment process. So what we do, we teach care companies how to fix internal processes, speed up time to hire, take away internal stresses from registered managers, admin teams, and ultimately make it so care companies can become reliant themselves and they don't have to look to external parties such as agencies.
And that's why we love talking to you, Stephen, because you've really enlightened us on many of those things that we do on a day-to-day basis that actually tend to cause some of the problems by our action or inaction. So let's start with some questions for you then, Stephen, and we can maybe try and take us through some of the areas that you think we need to look at as employers. So when you look at the recruitment process itself, and looking at the reality on the ground, what are you actually seeing in terms of how candidates are applying for those roles and how providers are responding to them?
Yeah, so the key question, I always like to put myself in a candidate's shoes because I've been a carer myself. And when I was applying for a carer role, I went to a job board. So I applied for 10 different jobs straight away. I applied for 10 different roles on Indeed in the hope that somebody would call me back. Typically, candidates are applying for 10 roles a day, and they're looking for a company that can meet the right hours, pays relatively well. Now, the problem you have sometimes is that care companies don't know this and they forget about the time to hire and the speed. So that is the biggest problem for care companies, I would say, is the actual time to, not necessarily time to hire, but time to contact. So what care companies need to do is there's a big difference between time to hire and time to contact, if that makes sense. So just picking up the phone is the ideal first stage that people need to master. That's the first absolute key element of the recruitment journey that internal teams need to master.
So in terms of people applying for multiple roles, so it's not just your role, they're applying for probably 10 or more roles and they're clicking the button because it's quite easy to do that online, to click a button to apply for multiple roles at the same time. So you talk about the difference between time to contact and time to hire. Why is the time to contacting candidates and the time to hire more important now more than ever in the recruitment process?
Yeah, you've touched on it there. So we know from statistics and data that we've done, candidates are applying between 5 and 7 roles a day before they get offered a role. And that typically takes 3 days to be offered a role. So you imagine a candidate has applied for, let's say, 15 jobs. If you don't pick up the phone and contact a candidate straight away. Let's say a candidate applies for 10 roles, 2 companies pick up the phone, 6 companies wait 3 days, and a couple of companies don't do anything. The companies who've picked up the phone and built rapport with a candidate are always going to be way ahead of any other company because they've called them, they've built a rapport, they've arranged an interview, they maybe even had the face-to-face interview, and then 3, 4 days later, care companies are picking up the phone and looking on Indeed. Oh, hi, you've applied for a role. The candidate typically has already been offered a role somewhere else, so you've completely lost that candidate. You've got to jump on the phone and treat every single candidate like gold dust. That's the market right now. It's a candidate-led market.
It's not really about the volume of applications in so much, it's about the behaviour. We talk about the recruitment process as a supply issue, and you're saying it's those who get in first that probably get the best pick of the bunch.
And I think companies need to look internally and have a health check or an audit themselves and say, look, what is our process? If a candidate applies, talk me through every single step of this process. And if we're not contacting candidates within 24 hours, which I think is a generous amount of time, really, why are we not able to do that? Is there a reason? Is there a bottleneck? Is there a structure, a process? What's stopping us from contacting candidates really quickly? Because the candidate wants to be contacted quickly as well, let's not forget.
Yeah, they're looking for a job. So you're describing a responsiveness issue, the speed at which we engage with people.
Absolutely. It's in everyday life, isn't it? If I have an inquiry online or if I want to get my car fixed, then I send an email out or whatever, pick up a phone. Typically, I'm going to get back to the ones who contact me first because they've made an effort, they've gone out of their way, and they've solved my problem. A candidate is applying for a job because they want to be hired, they want to work for a company. If you're showing them that you're interested in them, you are absolutely going to hire them before anybody else who doesn't understand time to hire.
And a great analogy about getting your car repaired. I remember phoning 5 garages recently to get something done, and it was the first one that came back to me was the one I booked in with. And that's a basic customer experience, a customer journey, isn't it?
I've just moved into a house. It's a rental. We applied for 8, and we got a call within 20 minutes to view this one. We went to view it the same day. We got offered it the next day. We signed. Now, 9 other homes came back within 3, 4 days. Oh, hi, do you still want to view this house? I'm like, I've literally just signed for a house. It's the same process. The other houses might have been better, maybe, but I wanted something quick and convenient, and they treated me really well. It's also that element. So it's not just about picking up the phone. You need to focus on the quality as well and building that rapport. I talk about rapport a lot, but it's so key in the recruitment journey.
So time and quality. Let's maybe just take a slight move into the advertising budget itself and how it's used and why that matters so much in recruitment. What are your thoughts around that? Because there's a lot of places we can put our money. Why is the budget and how it's used so important?
Oh God, yeah, we could. This is a big conversation which we should maybe spend an hour on another time because it's the number one question I get asked. Around 50 to 100 messages a week on LinkedIn and emails often. What should we be spending and where should we be spending it? So, look, the fact of the matter is, it depends on what stage you are in your business. I like to look at previous history. So, in the last 12 months, what have we spent on advertising and what was our return on investment? So, job boards, Meta, Google, whatever it may be, look at your historic data and see what your higher cost per application was. Now, the reality is, in my opinion, you need to be putting over 50% of your advertising budget on Indeed because Indeed is the strongest platform. Now, you should not be putting all of your money onto one platform because you want to spread that evenly. But you should not just throw money around. So we've audited over 1,000 care companies on their advertising spend. And I'm telling you now, 80% plus can't justify why they're spending an amount of money. And we're talking in the hundreds of thousands here a year. And there's no reason to spend that money. So we audit it so they can get a better return on investment. Why are you spending 200 grand a year on job boards? If you fix your processes, you can lower your budget, save money, invest that money into other areas, training, wages, invest it back into the team, whatever it may be. But it's a ridiculous spending money on advertising is something companies need to spend a lot of time analyzing and not just throw money about. It happens too often.
So we talk a lot at Caring and around looking at the data to tell you a story. So looking at that last 12 months and then working out what
Yeah.
you achieved in the last 12 months and then playing that forward, but spread your budget evenly, but focusing on some
Yeah.
core areas.
And just to simplify it, sorry, this isn't a complicated process. We spent £5,000 per month on Indeed. Let's just use Indeed as an example. How many interviews did we have? How many people showed for interview? How many people were offered? How many people started working? And how many people lasted at least 3 months? That should be the base standard for every care company. You should be able to have that data. Now, I know most care companies do not track that data. Why do they not track it? If I'm a decision maker, if I'm a director, if I'm an owner, that is the first thing I'm changing tomorrow with my team. I want to look at the data and track the analysis, because then you can learn how to improve. It's not pointing the finger. Look, guys, why is it costing £500 a hire? Why are we getting loads of no-shows? That's okay. You just need to be focusing on where your challenges are and how can you be better in future.
So not necessarily the providers they're not spending too little or too much. They're spending without the visibility of knowing what their money's doing. So wasting money.
Precisely. And make no mistake, yes, I would say most care companies spend too much money on job boards and advertising because they haven't fixed their internal processes. You need to look at the data. Some companies might need to spend more. They might need to, but I'm telling you now, the majority of care companies could save a significant amount of money long term on job boards.
If they fix those internal processes.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I would argue, look, spend more time on training and data and analysis, and then look at your cost for advertising.
So just moving that into those processes that we talked about. So what are the key internal processes providers should be looking at if they want to look at reducing that cost per hire? Because you said the majority are probably paying too much. Some might need to increase it, but the majority, and we're talking about the majority, what are those key processes they need to look at?
Yeah, so straight away, I'll go to very, very basics. Care recruitment is a very basic process, and a lot of companies try and overcomplicate it. They're looking at too many processes, AI, ATSs. Like sometimes you don't need all those things. You can very much simplify it. So straight away, key point number one, who owns recruitment? If I apply for your care home on a job board, what happens to me? What's my journey look like? Who's picking up the phone? Who's engaging with me? Are the staff trained to have a really great phone call with me? Not robotic, building a rapport with me, building a relationship, making it exciting. Stephen, I can see you've applied on Indeed. Can I say your CV looks fantastic? I notice you've worked for A, B, and C. And some of these aren't care roles. Do you mind telling me about that? And what made you apply for us? Like, how privileged are we that you've applied for us? And you should make it like that. You should make it a big deal that somebody has gone out of their way to apply for your business. So who's owning the recruitment? Who's picking up the phone? What's the quality like of the phone screen? Selling the care company, selling the training, the values, the amazing people, the longevity of staff. What happens after the phone screen as well? Call to actions are so big. A lot of companies we audit, over 70%, don't have a strong call to action. What I mean by that is you have a phone call with me and you've done an amazing job, and now you don't know what to do. You now need to email me in a few days. You need to let me know in a few days when you can meet me. I'll give you a call back. Let me know when you're free. And what happens now is 3, 4, 5 days, sometimes weeks have gone by. Oh, hi, Stephen. I spoke to you 2 weeks ago. We had an amazing conversation. We can now do interviews. I've got availability. Yeah, I've already been offered 2 other roles. That interview experience started really well, but you had no call to actions. So you've got to literally every single step of the journey needs to be focused on, every single little step.
Yeah, it's an end-to-end process, but you've got to almost wow the customer, who the employee is a potential customer, if you like, in a normal business sense. You've got to wow that at every stage. But we've got overcomplicated processes. And one thing I've noticed, and this is definitely true of younger people, is people are very fearful of picking up the phone these days. It's my generation, we lived on the telephones, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have email, but it's very hard to build up rapport and to sell your service on an email. It's much easier to have a conversation where you can read someone's voice and you can start to engage in a conversation to discuss. You get a really good sense of someone when you start to have that initial conversation. And I think that's really helpful, because you're describing a shift from recruitment being reactive to intentional. So you're not just looking at a process and saying, this has happened, I've got to do this. You're making it intentional and purposeful and building rapport and creating opportunities for your service.
Well, I'll tell you what, Richard, I don't know about you, but so nobody's born to be a recruiter. I would say I think you have to have something about you. And it's not an insult against admin teams recruiters or registered managers, you have to want to sell. You have to get a buzz from selling. And I don't know about you, but I love picking up the phone. I can't believe if somebody applies for a role with me when I was a HR manager, my God, I was like, oh God, where's the phone? Because I wanted to build a role. I was making it my mission to get them a job with us. But I'm built that way. I enjoy building relationships with people and I enjoy sales. That's what I love doing. Now, the administrator, recruitment manager, or whoever manages your recruitment might not be built that way. And that's might be a bad hire, they might not be skilled, or they might just not want to do it. So that's something care companies absolutely need to focus on as well. Look, who is owning this, going back to the ownership, and do they actually want to do this?
Absolutely. So rather than just the perspective of I'm posting a job, we need to design processes that converts interest into commitments. And that's through using all those resources you talked about, rapport, the telephone, etc. And I think that leads quite nicely into one of the biggest frustrations we hear at the moment. And it's a frustration we've heard for a very long time. And I remember you talking about this over 2 years ago, is no-shows to interviews.
Yeah.
So why do no-shows to interviews now seem to be as significant an issue as they have been over the last couple of years for care providers?
Yeah, so I think it comes from a lack of knowledge on the processes and eagerness to pick up the phone, which you've just touched on. I don't want to use the term laziness because that's unfair, but there has to be an element of accountability with care companies. I'm big on accountability, and that can be a positive as well. So we know from our analytics that the average, give or take, is about 65% no-show rates, which is ridiculously high. When I used to do recruitment, the average was about 4 or 5%. Now, if you've built a rapport with somebody over the phone, you've built a relationship with them, you've told them they've told you they're coming to the interview, there's no reason that person shouldn't be showing up for interview with you. Now, there's loads of little steps that go into this. So one of the biggest reasons there's no shows, in my opinion, is people messaging candidates on Indeed or email or Facebook saying, hi, thank you for your application. Can you come in for an interview? Sorry, when are you free for an interview? Now, there's been no phone call here. There's been no relationship, no building rapport again. Why should that person show up for interview when you've not made the effort to build a relationship with them? They don't know where they're going. They don't know who to meet. They don't know which company they've applied for. They don't know the benefits. So I would say that is the number one reason. It's it's messaging rather than picking up the phone. When you pick up the phone and build a relationship with somebody and they tell you they're coming to the interview, they've almost made an agreement with you that is going to happen. You then need a call to action. I'm going to follow up by an email. We've got parking on site. I'm going to link you to our social media pages. A massive key area for no-shows as well is that the distance between phone call and the face-to-face interview is far too long. So a person on a phone might go, look, we're not free this week, but we can do Friday next week. So let's say 9 days away. Why are you not free tomorrow? Why are you not free the day after? So you need to be making a massive effort to go above and beyond to meet that candidate. And that I think that is non-negotiable. When you speak to them on the phone, yeah, when are you free, Stephen? I can do 10 tomorrow. 10's perfect. I'm going to follow up by an email now. I'm going to tell you what to bring with you. I'm going to show you where the parking is. I'm going to give you directions. I'm going to let you know you're going to meet. We can't wait to see you tomorrow. Just checking, Stephen. Is there any reason you might not be able to show up tomorrow? I know people get busy and you mentioned you've got a job. Is there any reason you won't be able to make tomorrow? No, tomorrow's my day off. I'll definitely be there. You're almost making that person accountable.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's uncomfortable because the default narrative of the sector is that candidates aren't reliable, but actually it's probably partly built into the process that we have that's failed to reach that kind of relationship and commitment. And that's a very different conversation. So what we can control and what we can do can build that rapport and focus on time. Because I agree with you. I think if you're recruiting corporate executives who've got busy diaries, I understand you might be having to book 2 or 3 weeks in advance. I get that. But actually, we're working at quite a vibrant workforce and we've got a lot of vacancies. We've got a lot of roles to fill. We've got a lot of people out there. It is actually a very competitive market. So we need to be quick and we need to make people feel special and treated and supported.
Yeah, absolutely. And as well, I'm never going to blame people internally because there might be a lack of knowledge or education or training. It might be a training issue. Nobody's ever told them about this, so they don't know about it. But I'm not a fan of blaming candidates. I just don't think that's fair at all. And we have data analysis to show that it's not no-shows can be fixed. Absolutely, they can be fixed. But that I really want people to take away as well. Having availability for interviews is so huge. And that having that commitment and saying, look, okay, the RM might say to the recruiter or the administrator, look, okay, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for the next 2 weeks, I am committing between 10 and 3. That's my commitment to you. Yes, things might change at the last minute, but if they do change at the last minute, we are going to have a backup plan. So we're not letting the candidates down. You can't just, if you've got 5 interviews tomorrow, I'm not a fan of just calling them and changing it for another time and letting them down. No, what's the backup plan? Having something in place where whatever happens, you are meeting that candidate. It's your reputation as well, let's not forget.
So is it fair to say then that contact, the quality of the engagement, the interview experience, they're all directly related to no-show rates?
Absolutely, yeah. It's not, okay, Stephen, we picked up the phone and we were calling people really quickly, but we still got terrible no-show rates. You have to bring it all together. I love consistency. It's the biggest thing I talk about on LinkedIn and I talk about with my team all the time. Consistency. You need to put all these things together and be consistent. There's no point doing one of them and having an amazing phone screen, but then there's no call to action, or having an amazing phone screen and call to action, but your interviews are in 2 weeks. They all have to come together as one. And to give people some reassurance and to be very positive and optimistic, no-shows can be fixed with a lot of simple changes.
Brilliant. I'll keep it simple. Okay. I want to shift on to one of the sort of most challenged resources in the care service, and that's the registered manager. They have got one hell of a challenging role. It's tough to be a registered manager in any care service, and
Yeah.
it's tough to be a manager. But in residential care homes, it's really tough. But would you say that registered managers generally actually want to be involved in posting jobs, screening candidates, and arranging interviews? Is that something you think they're interested in doing?
No, definitely not. No. Our data and the people I've spoke to always suggest that they do not want to be involved in the early stages of recruitment. I want to differentiate between recruitment as a whole, which is broad, and the early stages. So registered managers do not want to learn how to post really engaging job advert. They don't want to learn how to use Indeed. That takes years of work. It took me a long time. Picking up the phone as well is not a priority of a registered manager because they are too busy and they have a hell of a lot of responsibilities. What an amazing role a registered manager is and what a lot of responsibility it comes with. Now, a lot of registered managers, as you'll know as well, will say, look, we do have a recruitment problem here and I really need to make it a priority. So they admit it's a priority, probably the number one or number two priority in the business. However, it becomes to the bottom of the pile because they're doing a million and one other things. They then pass it on to the administrator or the senior carer or somebody else within the care home. And then they're just guessing as well because they're not skilled and they're getting pulled to pillar and post. So to answer your question, absolutely not. They don't want to be involved in it, but they do, in my opinion, and from the data, they do want to be involved in the face-to-face element of it because they enjoy that part.
Yeah. And I think it's a really important point because we've placed a necessity on them to run a recruitment process end to end, and they really need to focus on also running a safe, high quality care service. And that's the primary part of their role at that moment in time because they don't know what the day is going to throw at them. And it's an incredibly reactive role. But out of necessity, they're given everything, and that's their responsibility. And then we're surprised then when kind of recruitment is inconsistent, vacancies continue to persist, and the kind of the pressure builds up. It becomes like a structural issue, not an individual one. And
Yeah.
so recognizing the role of the registered manager in which part of the process I think is really important. But so in effect, where should recruitment sit within an organization in order for it to work effectively?
Yeah, it's a great question. A care home company, whether it's one care home or hundreds, they need to decide, look, do we need an internal recruitment team? Do we want to outsource our recruitment? It's something that, again, going back to data analysis, personally, the biggest success we see is when companies have an internal recruitment team dedicated because they are typically skilled, they enjoy recruitment, they've applied for the role, and they're doing it every single day. And if you've got an internal recruiter, 95% of their day is going to be focused on that recruitment. Registered manager, no, you're doing a million things. An administrator typically, and it's in the nicest way possible, won't be skilled enough to do it. So I think you've honestly got to hire an internal recruitment, either one person or a team. We see it so often that even like area managers and even owners are taking over recruitment, but they'll do 1 or 2 hours a week. recruitment is a full-time role. It never ends. Never. It's not a 9 to 5 role either. So I'm a big fan of hiring into recruit. We get asked this all the time, or should I hire 2 administrators or a full-time recruiter? And like, I would always choose the recruiter. Absolutely. Somebody who's multi-skilled and who can take on the skills and is willing to meet the targets as well. I would always go for the hiring an internal recruiter.
So defined roles for defined parts of the process, and
Yeah.
really investing in someone to own that process, because it's not something you can just do for 2 hours a week. It needs to be something that's agile.
Absolutely. You would registered manager role. Let's focus on that. You wouldn't give the administrator the registered manager role. You can't do it. It's not legal. So why are you giving the administrator or the senior carer recruitment? No chance. Like it's such a skilled role. I've done it. I did it for 2 years, and you have to learn, and you have to be really, really motivated to do it. And it is time consuming, and it can be stressful. So that's why, if it's stressful and time consuming, is a registered manager going to want to do it?
So you really need to have someone who focuses on that as a core part of their role, and they become really good at what they're doing.
100%.
So
yeah.
Just if there's a care home manager watching or listening this today, what are the sort of the 2 to 3 things that you would tell them to change tomorrow in terms of your experience and what you've seen over the last few years?
I would immediately commit to times and dates for face-to-face interviews. I would make that a non-negotiable and test yourself for a month and say, look, okay, I'm going to do it. I don't care if that's 3 hours a day for a week or 2 weeks. I would absolutely commit to that. I would then commit to, I spoke about this a few years ago, put yourselves in the candidate's shoes as well. Remember what it was like when you were applying for a carer role. Let's not forget, all registered managers have been a carer at some point. Fact. So what was it like when you were applying for a care role? And if you were that carer showing up to your care home, how would you want to be treated, and how wouldn't you want to be treated? You would want to be spoke to really well. You would want to know that it's a great company to work for. You're likable, you're professional, you build great rapport, you build great relationships, you have amazing training. We're a family, we look after you. Really focus with that candidate how you would have wanted to be treated. Number 3, absolutely, I would focus on the quality of the face-to-face interview and make it very personable. Show people around the home, get to know them. Yes, you can do the questions. Yes, you can do the legal stuff and the admin. Of course you can, but build a rapport and build a relationship with people as well.
So putting that time aside, making sure that time is preserved for interviews, putting yourself in the candidate's shoes, walking a mile in another person's shoes, I think is a really important anecdote that's not really lived, because we tend to look at things because of our busy lives, through our own sort of lenses, but looking through other people's lenses, and that quality of the face-to-face interview. And that gives me goosebumps in some respects, because when you talk about being personable, yes, and building rapport, yes, I get that, and I fully understand that. But the power of a show round, when you're just bringing someone in for an interview, introducing them to another member of staff who might be on the floor and getting them to say something. You've told me that before, and so it's stuck with me. But also, you haven't got eye contact when you're walking next to each other around a home. So it changes the conversation slightly. Eye contact is important when you're interviewing and asking those key questions, but actually then having a conversation where there's no eye contact, it's more relaxed. You're walking around and talking about the home and pointing out things that are happening. It feels more fluid and more natural. And that family feel is what you really want in a care service, isn't it?
Yeah, think about when you meet any new person ever, whether it's networking, a wedding, a party, whatever. Some people you like, some people you don't like. Get me away from this person. Oh, I want to keep talking to them. Let's have a drink. I'm going to get their number. That's what happens. Now, I personally think it's easy to be likable. Say nice things, ask polite questions, compliment people. Imagine a carer coming for an interview. That's a nerve-wracking experience. I've had interviews. I've had hundreds of interviews. Nerve-wracking, every single one of them. Now, they become less nerve-wracking and more enjoyable when the person I'm talking to is very polite to me and makes me feel welcome. Let's have a cup of tea. I noticed on your CV you live in so-and-so in Leeds. I used to live there. Do you support Leeds? Oh, yeah, I do. So, like, straight away, we're having a conversation. Get rid of the robotic element of everything and the idea that you think you have to be really official and corporate. Remove anything corporate, absolutely, straight away. And just focus on asking that person questions. People love to be asked questions. And you're going to make them more relaxed. They're going to let their guard down. And guess what? They're going to give you better interview answers. Richard, I absolutely loved it. Because I was like, I'm hiring this. I've not even met them yet, and I'm hiring them. Fact. I'm going to make sure they pass this interview because it's my responsibility to make sure they pass, and I'm going to make sure it happens today.
That's amazing because you built that rapport beforehand, so you know almost who's walking through the door. So, and I think anyone who says they're not nervous for interview, I think is probably fibbing, to be honest, unless you're some kind of high-flying, fluting corporate or any other person.
Exactly. Let's link that to the phone screen. You've not gave the person confidence. They're a bit sorry. I've asked a question, but they've not really answered that. What days will I be working? What's the pay? Where is it again? You've now put doubt into that person, haven't you? And it's I'm going to tell them I'm going to come to interview, but I'm not. I just want to get off the phone. And that's going to happen. That's going to happen in all walks of life. So imagine if you go have a really look, Stephen, you mentioned about hours there. Can I go over the hours a bit one more time so you've got reassurance about the hours? Because this might not be the right role for you because we do work alternate weekends. You're right. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Stay in touch. If it changes, that's fine. Get rid of all that doubt. Make people excited and get rid of the FAQs for them. Like in the email to interview as well. Hi, Stephen, just to confirm, as we discussed on the phone, so you're reassuring them and confirming these are the working hours, this is the pay. Yes, there is parking on site. I'm going to send you a Google map now with an image and parking number 16 because that's for you tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, how special do you feel?
Yeah, you've made me feel really calm. I trust you. I've warmed to you. I want to work for you. Absolutely.
Look, that's been really helpful. I think we probably want to try and bring it together if we can. If I could ask you what sort of good looks like, what does a strong, effective recruitment process actually look like in care today, bringing all of this sort of together?
Yeah, it's going over what we've discussed ultimately. I cannot stress, Richard, I talk about it so often on LinkedIn and other podcasts. Speed is so important. It's just going to destroy your recruitment if you're not quick. When people apply, you have to be contacting them within 24 hours, like non-negotiable. Remove the messaging straight away. That needs to go instantly. There needs to be interview availability. An unbelievable face-to-face interview. We focus on the face-to-face interview. What happens? Is it structured? Have you shown the person around? Have you made them feel warm and welcome? And as well, I would argue here as well, what happens at the end of the interview? The end of the interview is really key because sometimes it can be awkward and people don't really know what to do. So I would make that a really strong point and say, hi, Stephen, look, we've just finished the interview now. You've answered all the questions really great. Can I just ask, what do I need to tell you in order for you to choose us over any other company? And see what the person says. You'll be really surprised. And why not ask that question? But you're building that rapport with them and building that relationship and definitely be offering the role within 24 hours, non-negotiable. I used to love offering a role on the spot personally because people have argued with me this and saying, look, offering on the spot is too desperate. It looks too needy. And we need to go check with a care coordinator. No, you already knew you had this interview. They can do 32 hours. You should know whether they can work in this rota. And then after that, it doesn't just end there, offering a role. When you've offered a role to somebody, have you made it an unbelievable onboarding experience? Is it in writing that they've been offered a role? Are they going to hand their notice in? Have you started the compliance, the references, the DBS check? Have you made everything really smooth? And this is a huge point as well. Personally, I used to do this. I would be doing email check-ins and phone check-ins weekly before they start. And once a week within the first 2 or 3 months of them joining as well. Hi, Stephen, just a quick one. Your DBS is on stage 3, just keeping you updated. I've sent you over the training links. If you could get them done for me, I'd really appreciate it. Really buzzing for you to start. Are you still excited? And why not make it like that? Make it exciting. Nobody in the history of recruitment has ever gone, that Stephen's really doing my head and he keeps updating me about my onboarding. I'm sick of hearing from him. No chance. That's never happened. Nobody's ever going to complain about you offering unbelievable customer service. Now, if you're offering to come in every day and we need to see you again, yeah, that's annoying. A simple email, text, phone call, that is an unbelievable way to get your onboarding numbers up because as well, we haven't really touched on it, but we maybe should. People often complain that we offered 100 people last year but only 52 people started or whatever the numbers are. Okay, there's a bottleneck with your onboarding. So onboarding is a huge part as well.
So it's not really about doing more, it's about doing things differently. And that speed, the responsiveness, the picking up the phone within 24 hours, not messaging, making it personable, really important, being available, being in the moment, checking in, wowing them. I think making that a bit of a wow factor is really important. And
Yeah,
if you can offer on the spot, if they're the right candidate, why wouldn't you? Because you built that rapport beforehand. So even before they come into the interview, whether they're going to be right for the job, because if you built the right rapport up front, then and it's not right, then you're not going to invite them for an interview. You can invite them
yeah,
for an interview because you built that rapport.
yeah.
Yeah,
Because with the phone screen as well, I would make it. I think a phone screen can be done in 5-10 minutes. You don't have to have a really long phone screen. Now, the first 70% of the phone screen needs to be about them, the company, selling, making them want to come meet you face to face. 10 to 20%, maybe a bit more, is I just need to check you can do these hours, you can do this, you can do that. It's the essential requirements. Those need to be addressed. So when they come to face-to-face interview, I now know they can do those hours, they live close, they can do the training dates. So the face-to-face interview now is it's ultimately down to the candidate to fail this, which they probably won't if you make it an amazing experience for them. So then at the end of the interview, you're not going, oh, can you do these hours? Sorry, I just need to check with someone. I'll contact you in 3 days. We just need to check some stuff at our side. No, that should have been dealt with earlier. And maybe as well as a team, you can say, look, guys, what interviews have we got this week? We've got 15 interviews. Okay, great. Can all of those interviews do days and some of them do nights? Yes, great. Excellent. It's down to us to now convert them.
yeah, superb. And I think just one thing you did mention, Paul, which I think is worth just reiterating, is that checking in. So checking in during the process, but also afterwards. So when you're settling someone in, that onboarding process, the embedding into the organisation, everything going okay, any questions, any issues. I think that's a really important one. That's come up in lots of different places, but I think very few people do that.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of time, so I want to get on to the last bit, really, if that's okay. What worries you most, really? What concerns you about most providers, what they don't address with these kind of recruitment challenges? Where do you see your biggest concerns?
Yeah, there's probably 2 points. There are a lot, but the main two ones are I don't. I'm a big fan of values-based recruitment. Massive fan of it. I used to be a supermarket manager. I was a groundsman for a Premiership football team. I've done a million jobs before I became a care assistant. 10 years ago, I was 30 years old when I became a care assistant. Now, the problem I've got is that companies are looking at people who apply on Indeed, seeing if they've got experience. If they haven't, rejecting them. Now, that is a huge concern for the care industry as a whole. Like, period. Because if you're rejecting people because they haven't got experience, you're throwing away potential excellent talent, and we're not introducing new people into the industry. So why are we doing that? And that's happening more and more. Look, and with the feedback I hear, Stephen, it's simply easier to train people with experience. And I've argued that all day long. I don't agree with that whatsoever, because I personally, when I was a HR manager and I was involved in training, like the idea that somebody is new because I can teach them. So I think values-based recruitment is number one. The second problem I've got is if people don't address these issues, you're then looking at agency troubles, which is costing companies a fortune. No continuity of care. Agency staff are paid more than the permanent staff, which causes friction, then causes permanent staff to leave, and then you're chasing your tail as well. So if you fix your processes internally and you focus on budgets, then you can ultimately remove agency. Yes, you can use agency as an emergency source, but if you become reliant on agency, then that is a problem.
Yeah, and we know agencies at its lowest level for some time, but agencies returned to pre-pandemic levels. And I remember pre-pandemic, we were all saying how crazy agency costs were, but we've had that artificial peak and we've now dropped off and we suddenly think, oh, it's okay. But actually, no, it's the levels it was at before when we were complaining it was a real problem. I
Yeah.
do like values-based recruitment. That for me is really incredibly important. And we've done some other work on that recently, but I think you're absolutely right. Rejecting those without experience is a real red flag, because actually the gold for us as recruitment people working within care services, getting that new person, new to care, who's got the right values to thrive within adult social care. That's what we want. What we don't want is people just continually moving around the system for an extra 5 or 10p an hour. Yes,
Yeah.
that happens. We know that happens, but actually it costs on average about £6,000 a year to recruit someone and retain them and train them, one person for a 12-month period. Actually, far better to bring in a new person, have that new person embedded in the system. Continuity of care, I think that links into the next kind of point that I wanted to touch on, because you talked about continuity, but have you seen examples of where poor recruitment processes start to have an impact on the care services themselves? I think that's where the continuity thing comes in for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I've visited hundreds of care homes face to face and provided audits and health checks and met care staff, and had not interviews, but met care staff to get an idea of the home and how things are going. And it's always either the number one or number two problem that they give me feedback on is, look, we don't like the fact that there's a big agency here, because agency staff can, not all, but they can tend to, their heart's not in it because they might only be doing 2 weeks there and they know nothing about the person they're caring for, which is a big problem. And the problem as well, you get the staff members who are permanent staff become resentful of agency staff because they're getting paid more, but they're not as skilled as that person, and they're not showing the same loyalty and dedication to that particular company as they are, which can demotivate staff. It can have a big impact on morale, which ultimately affects the level of care you deliver.
Fantastic. And I think this is where recruitment stops being an HR issue and becomes a quality and safety issue. Because vacancies increase pressure, impact staff behaviour. It puts pressure on staff who move towards burnout because they're covering those vacancies, and ultimately impacts on the quality of care. But Stephen, I know we are out of time. I just want to say a huge thank you. That's been incredibly insightful. I think what today's conversation really highlights to me has been fundamental, that the recruitment in social care is often framed as a supply problem. We tend to blame those downstream, the care potential candidates coming through, but in reality, a large part, not the only part, but a large part of the challenge really does sit within the processes, the speed, the ownership and understanding internally within our own procedures as employers. We're not just competing for candidates, we're competing on the experience of employing people who want to come and work for our organisation and really selling the value of what we have to offer. We do take too long to respond. We don't engage effectively as well as we could do at all stages of the process, right the way from picking up that first phone call within 24 hours, but then also when somebody's onboarded, because we know a significant amount drop out in that first month. So staying in contact is really important. And we don't understand our own data, which ultimately is what's telling us how we're recruiting, telling us how we're performing. Care providers are under immense pressure, and no one is suggesting that the HR recruitment process is easy, specifically not for a care home manager who's not trained in HR. But sometimes improvement doesn't necessarily come from large-scale reform. It comes from picking up the phone sooner, understanding your data better, and taking ownership of the recruitment journey. Vacancies themselves should not be accepted as an inevitable. Wasted recruitment spend should not be deemed normal, and candidates disengaged before interviews and not showing up should not be written into being just how it is for us as an employer. If this conversation has made us reflect on your recruitment process as a listener, then it really has done its job. And I just want to thank Stephen again for your time today, and thank everyone else for listening and watching. Thank you.